All right. Welcome to the Eagles Club call. This call tonight is on trust. It is the truth about trust. And there's so many applications of trust. There's so many areas where trust is actually the biggest issue that we're dealing with. But for a lot of people, we don't realize that it's a trust game. We don't realize that goal setting is about trust, that negative head talk is about trust, that sabotage is about trust. And when you understand how big of an issue trust is and how it's showing up in all these different areas of our lives, then it simplifies things. And simplicity is super powerful. Simplicity is what can cut through overwhelm and can cut through other challenges. Hang on one sec. Deanna, we are now viewing your screen. This happened before too, and I don't know how this is. I don't know how to take it back from you other than kicking you off. So I don't want to kick you off. There you go. Thank you. It's crazy to me that Zoom allows people to just take over the call accidentally or otherwise. So thank you for that. Anyway, when we understand that trust is really at play in all these different areas, it simplifies the target. And so many of us are feeling so overwhelmed with all the different areas that we feel out of balance with, or all the different things that we feel like we're juggling in life, and all the different to-dos that we have. And simplicity is wildly powerful when we employ it or apply it to our sabotage and to our balance and goal setting and all these different areas of life. So the truth about trust is that it's always an internal game. Actually, I can't say always. There are relationships, maybe business partnerships, where external trust is important. And it is an external game where you are trusting that somebody else will take and fulfill their own responsibilities, right? So in the military, let's say, everybody is trained to have certain roles, and my role on the front line is different than your role in the middle, different than your role in the back, and what have you. And if people are not fulfilling their roles, then there's danger. People could literally die. And so in certain organizations, in certain partnerships, there is external trust that is not based on you. It's not based on internal trust. But for the most part, all the things that we generally struggle with as entrepreneurs is internal trust. Even though other people are involved, it's really internal trust. So we have a lot of people that are in home-based businesses or trying to build a coaching business, just entrepreneurial in some way. And to build your business requires interaction with other people. And if you ask most people what their biggest frustrations are in building a business that involves people in any way, their biggest frustrations are almost always with people. They'll tell you that they get frustrated when people lie to them, or they get frustrated when they say they're going to show up and they don't show up. They get frustrated when there's any kind of conflict. They get frustrated with the sales conversations. The irritations in most of our businesses have to do with people. And if we apply trust to what's going on, we are attempting to trust other people to do what they say they're going to do, to say yes when we think they should say yes. When we've predetermined that they should say yes, then we are placing this expectation on them, and then we're trusting that they're going to follow the expectations that we've placed on them. So trust seems like it's an external thing, but that's all a misplacement of trust. We are placing our expectations and therefore trust onto other people when they don't belong with other people. The reality is do we trust ourselves in those situations? Most people are afraid of conflict. They're afraid of conflict because they don't like the feeling of failure. They don't like the idea that other people might judge them. They don't like to lose friends. They don't like to lose clients. So most of us shy away from conflict because we're afraid of the consequences of the conflict. We're afraid of the loss. But really what we're afraid of is how we feel after the conflict. But how we feel after the conflict is a function of how we treat ourselves after the conflict. So we're not afraid of failure. We're afraid of what we say to ourselves after the failure has occurred, because what we say to ourselves is what creates the negative feelings. Most people think that if they get rejected, that they'll feel bad. The rejection does not create the experience of feeling bad. It's what you say to yourself after the rejection. I'm a loser. I'll never succeed. So-and-so is right about me. I should have never quit my job. Those are the judgments that create the negative experience. And we can lump that all together into self-abuse, whether it's super intense or mildly intense. It's the self-abuse after the experience that creates the negativity. So the real question that we have to ask ourselves is, do I trust myself to not beat myself up in the face of failure? In other words, can I commit to doing something, whatever it is? Can I commit to making the phone call? Can I commit to doing the video? Can I commit to talking to people about my business? Can I commit to having a crucial, critical conversation with my partner in my marriage or in my relationship? And can I trust myself in the face of whatever happens? If you can trust yourself in the face of whatever happens after the conflict, then you won't be afraid of the conflict. But if you cannot trust yourself in your own relationship with yourself in the face of that conflict, then you can only be afraid of the conflict. And therefore, you have to spend your life trying to avoid conflict, which is never a good commitment. That's never a healthy commitment, avoiding conflict, because no matter what you want to create in life, there will be conflict. There will be internal conflict, external conflict, real conflict, fake conflict. And if you decide that you want to grow beyond where you currently are, but you want to not ever have conflict, those two things can't live together. So you're either going to be committed to your growth and conflict, or you're going to be committed to avoiding conflict and staying stagnant. Those are the only two options. But what most people are doing, even though they're not consciously aware of this, most people are committed consciously to growing, but they're more committed unconsciously to avoiding conflict because they don't like the way conflict feels. Well, what I'm introducing for you and inviting you to take on is the conflict negativity is a function of trust with ourselves. Do we trust ourselves to not abuse ourselves in the face of and after conflict? Because if we can't trust ourselves with ourselves, then all we can do is hide ourselves from ourselves. So let me say that again, and let me put it in the second person. If you can't trust yourself with yourself, you can only hide yourself from yourself. And most people are highly committed to avoiding confrontations with themselves. It shows up as avoiding confrontations and conflict with others, but the real conflict and confrontation they have is with themselves. Now, this sounds like the way to go if you want to live the safe route, right? The ego and the intellect that's afraid of losing and craves security and craves feeling good and doesn't like the disruptive negative feelings. The intellect convinces us that that's the way to go. That's the win. right? Let's keep ourselves feeling good. But the reality is the deeper win for your soul is evolution and growth. And so you can't be committed to both of those things at the same time. You have to pick. Most people pick their heads. They pick their intellect to commit to. That's why they're afraid of failing and afraid of taking risks and afraid of losing, because their intellect convinces them that that is the scariest thing. But in reality, the scariest thing is a soul that never goes after its dreams. I think that's the scariest thing. But in order to play that game, we have to embrace conflict. And the best way to embrace conflict is to trust yourself inside that conflict. Because if you decided that you will never beat yourself up again, that you will never abuse yourself no matter what happens, then you quite literally cannot be afraid of any potential conflict. We can never be afraid of anything other than something bad happening. So if we remove the possibility of something bad happening, and that something bad is how we treat ourselves, if we remove that possibility, then people can't be afraid of talking to others. They can't be afraid of doing videos. They can't be afraid of taking chances when we remove the risk. And so if we play with this now and we say, oh, wow, this is all an internal trust game, and do I trust myself to take care of myself? Do I trust myself to be a cheerleader instead of an abuser? I mean, think about this. We all have access to kids in some way, right? We either have nieces, nephews, we have our own children, we have friends of the family, we have memories when we were kids, we have access to children. We have access to young people in some way. And every adult that I ever talk to and ask some version of this question of what would you say to a child that just tried something but they failed? The adult will say, as I'm sure all of you would say, some version of it's okay, get back up, try again. There's nothing wrong. Dust off your knees. This is the way to succeed. Some form of cheerleading, some form of it's okay, you're okay, keep going. Yet with ourselves, we pretty much take the exact opposite stance most of the time and turn it up, amplify it by about 1,000. Nothing's okay, everything's going to hell, and you suck, right? Like that's the internal dialogue that most of us have with ourselves. Yet that's not what we know the child needs. We know the child doesn't need that. But for whatever reason, our ego decides that we do need that. So how do we deal with this behavior where we operate in the exact opposite of the way that we know we should operate and the way that we want to be operated with, the way that we want to be treated? Our inner child wants to be treated by a cheerleader. It wants to be treated gently. It wants somebody to say, that's okay, get back up, try again, I believe in you. But we don't provide that voice. And most of us provide the abuser's voice so viciously that the cheerleaders that are available to us in our external surroundings in the form of other relationships are few and far between. So the people that do say, I believe in you, the people that do say, keep going, they get drowned out by the internal voice that says, stop, everybody hates you, you're gonna fail again, this is shameful, it's embarrassing, you're a loser, some form of that, right? And I'm speaking totally from experience. This is very easy for me to access because even to this day, I have access to this inner vicious judger. So these two channels are really the simplistic relationship that we only need to focus on. Which channel are we going to plug into? Are we going to plug into the cheerleading channel, or are we going to plug into the abusing channel? Everybody knows which one we should, but very rarely do we consciously and consistently plug into the cheerleading channel. But just think of what your life would be like if you could turn that internal dialogue off that ridicules you all the time. The voice that says, no, 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 don't do that. What if it all goes to hell? What if they say no? What if people take advantage of you? What if you fail? What if you get embarrassed? What if you lose money? That voice that is constantly catastrophizing the future is the voice that will constantly keep you out of action. That voice is saying, if you take action, bad things can happen. And so the problem with that is when we listen to that voice and it starts to become cemented as our default voice and our default programming, then we have programmed ourselves to have a default avoidance and resistance to action. Because anytime that we contemplate action, we immediately think of all the bad things that could happen if it goes wrong. And there's a never-ending supply of potential catastrophes that could go wrong, especially when we get to make them up in our head. There's a never-ending supply to the amount and to the depth of the catastrophe and misery that action might produce. But yet we all know that the only way from here to there is action. The only way to go from where we are to where we want to go, the only way to move beyond our comfort zone, beyond the walls, beyond our restrictions, the only way to go after our goals is obviously action. Because we're not sitting here holding on to our biggest goals and dreams. Those are out there. So we've got this constant conflict where we know that we have to move forward, yet our mind keeps telling us all the bad things that could happen when we move forward. And then it becomes, for most people, it becomes an exercise in misery anytime a potential decision is presented. Whether it's investing in this gigantic opportunity, whether it's a business or a coach or a stock or something like that, where you could lose $5,000, $10,000, or it's what to choose from the menu or anywhere in between. We take on the belief that all decisions are potential catastrophe. And that becomes irrational. It becomes over-exaggerated and irrational to where we are now afraid of decisions. And there never has been anybody who has achieved anything significant without making bold decisions. No such thing as a leader who never made decisions. No such thing as a passive influencer or a passive success story. There's no such thing. We have to cross those lines of our fear and our doubts and all of those scary voices that we have. But the only way to do it is to trust ourselves no matter what happens. And then when we confront the conflict, things go wrong. People either don't choose us or friendships go away, and yet we're still okay, then that gives us more evidence that we can continue moving forward. Because up until this point, all the evidence is don't go forward. It's dangerous out there. It's so scary moving forward that you should just stay where you are because we know how this is. And then the mind goes, yeah, but I'm not even happy here. But the intellect will then say, it doesn't matter. It's worse out there. Comfortable misery is better than the unknown. And I think one of the biggest tragedies is when we buy that story. We buy the story that comfortable misery is actually better and safer than the unknown. And then I would say what's even more tragic than that is when it becomes such a pattern that we don't even recognize it as a pattern. We don't recognize it as something that we can explore and confront and change. It just is. And then we make all of our decisions based on the potential catastrophe that could happen if we take action. So now the scales have flipped to where we have to motivate ourselves and coach ourselves and protect ourselves in order for us to choose to take a step. And each one of those steps that we choose feel like gigantic risks. They feel like huge uphill battles because we've made them out to be so risky. We've made the consequences so big in our head. And because each one of these risks feel like gigantic uphill battles, we have to pick and choose very carefully. And one of the things that we do when we are attempting to pick and choose the battles that we're going to go after is we search for the guaranteed ones. We search for the choices that we feel are guaranteed to work. And then we motivate ourselves, we inspire ourselves, we do everything that we know that we should do. We get a little energy in our bodies, and then we finally go after this one particular battle. We commit to this one choice after a lot of contemplation and a lot of preparation and a lot of prediction around the way it's going to go, which then turns into an expectation. And then we're placing our trust in these external variables, whether there are people on that road or the universe or circumstances that we say, this is the way this road is supposed to go. So when we spend all of this energy predicting the way the road is going to feel and deciding it's supposed to do this, it's supposed to operate like this, they are supposed to act like this, I am then supposed to act like this. When we predict the future that way so that we can create this guaranteed success in our minds, very rarely will it work out that way. But because we've put so much mental and emotional energy into it, when it doesn't work out that way, the catastrophe is bigger. The disappointment is heavier. And then the self-abuse is louder. And that judging voice says, see, I told you what could go wrong. You didn't listen to me. Shame on you. You're even a bigger loser than I thought you were. Don't you ever take a risk like that again. And then like a wounded animal, we retreat. And we go, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry I didn't listen to you. That wasn't respectful of you. That wasn't fair of me. How dare I take risks like that? How dare I dream? And then the wound causes us to retreat for some period of time until the pain of sitting here with these unchased dreams outweighs our memory of the catastrophe. And the further away we get from that catastrophe, the more we think maybe we could actually do it better this time. But the more that we create what I call motivational scar tissue, the more that our inactivity becomes a pattern. So now the next time we decide to take a shot at something, the hill is even steeper. And usually because the hill is steeper, there's less of a chance that we succeed. There's more of a chance that we fail faster. And then the voice comes back louder. It's like, I can't believe you forgot how much of a loser you are. I can't believe you didn't listen to me again. And then the shame feels bigger, the embarrassment feels bigger, and this pattern just gets continued. Whether we're conscious of it or not, this is the pattern that most people are actually going through when it comes to goal setting. Most people have experienced setting a goal, whether it's weight loss or finding a true love or building a business or anything at all. We've experienced this pattern in goal setting where we went after a goal, we didn't get it, and we felt bad. We felt embarrassed. We beat ourselves up. We got motivated at some point, went for the same goal or a different goal, didn't get it, licked our wounds, decided we'll never do that again at an unconscious level, got motivated around January 1st, went after the goal again, process just repeats itself. And each time, usually we stay committed a shorter period of time before we quit. And this cycle then gets shorter and shorter and shorter, and the time between our periods of commitment get longer and longer and longer. So we commit to less things further apart, and our commitment when we do commit is also less. We quit faster and then retreat. So the truth is, this is many people's, if not most people's, experience in goal setting. Let me know if you agree with that on some level. This is my experience of goal setting, at least. And when we have this experience of goal setting, our protection mechanism, which just tries to keep us safe at all costs and also tries to conserve our energy, will build up these internal patterns, internal dialogue to try to keep us from taking more risks because we're just trying to avoid the pain. And this mechanism, I want to touch on this point. This mechanism that tries to conserve energy is really important. If you've tried to climb a hill before, metaphorically in goal setting, you've tried to climb a hill and you didn't make it and you fell all the way back down to the bottom, the unconscious mind learns. And it says, each time I try to climb this hill or any hill, I end up back here anyway. I might as well just conserve the energy and just stay here. I mean, if I'm going to end up here anyway, why would I try to run up it and risk the injuries as we fall back down? I might as well just stay here. And then it forms all these sabotaging patterns and fears that we have that become irrational. The purpose is to keep us safe and keep us conserved energetically. That's all. Now, if you've climbed that hill and actually reached the top of it, but then through circumstances that you do or don't control, you fell back off of that hill, then it's even worse. Because now you've taught yourself that you're coming down this hill whether you succeed or not. You don't trust yourself to stay on top of the hill. So you might as well just stay here. And so I think one of the biggest tragedies is when the human spirit has determined that it should no longer try because the risk isn't worth the potential reward. But when we understand the risk that we're afraid of is not the failure, the risk that we're actually afraid of is the self-abuse that we go through, then we can control it. Which takes me all the way back to the beginning of the call. If I can control how I treat myself, if I trust myself to be a cheerleader instead of an abuser, whether I get one step up the hill, 50 steps up the hill, almost to the top and fall back down, or all the way to the top and fall back down. No matter what happens, I'm not leaving my side. No matter what happens, I will pick myself back up and encourage myself. No matter what happens, I will not kick me while I'm down. Then you'll have more internal permission to go up those hills. And what happens if we're afraid of the self-abuse, not only is the hill itself difficult to climb because it feels like it's so uphill, the protective mechanism that I've just been putting a voice to is literally standing in front of us, pushing us back down the hill. So we not only need to go up the incline, but we need to move through this force. It's like pushing a big boulder up the hill, this force that's trying to get us back to where we started. So we've got all of these variables against us, but it's all because of us. And I think the most sacred relationship that so many of us never take the time to nurture is the one with ourselves. Because we're actually afraid of being in our own company alone. That's when the brutality comes out for most of us. And so if we're afraid to be alone with ourselves because of the self-abuse, then we don't trust our safety. And think about this for a moment. If we don't trust that we will be safe in our own company, how can we trust that we will be safe in others' company? And if we think that safety is found in other people so that they can protect us from ourselves, I don't know how that could be healthy, because now you constantly need somebody else to be holding you up in order to keep you from the brutality that's waiting for you internally. So the solution here is to be so trustworthy with yourself that failure doesn't scare you, because it won't trigger the abuse. And part of this internal trust is removing trust from anything we don't control. Don't put your trust in other people. Don't put your trust in outcomes that you don't control. Don't put your trust in circumstances. Don't put your trust in politics. Don't put your trust in the weather. Don't put your trust in anything that you don't immediately control, because that's not stable. As long as you trust your safety with something you don't control, then your emotional well-being is unstable. Now, I just want to make a little disclaimer that I'm not saying don't get into relationships and don't get into business partnerships and don't trust in people. But your deepest trust when it comes to your emotional well-being must be with you. And if you are clean and clear with your own emotional trust, then you can put trust in other people. But when it's broken, it won't devastate you because you're complete with the trust in yourself. And then when things don't go well, business partnerships fall down, or other people lie, or other people don't follow through, it's okay. It's just a learning experience. It's not an emotional devastation. So I'm not saying that we can't ever put some trust in others, but we first need to go inward and fully trust ourselves. And then we can cleanly trust other people in a healthy way. And here's the cool thing. When I am no longer afraid of you breaking your commitment to me, I will attract more people that won't break their commitments to me. But when I'm afraid of other people breaking their commitments to me because I have too much at stake and I'm trying to source my value in their opinions of me, or I'm trying to give my success or my life to other people to take care of, if there's too much at stake, then I will be afraid of you dropping me. And as long as I'm afraid of you dropping me, I will actually attract people that will drop me. And one of the reasons that I will constantly attract people that will drop me is because I haven't learned this lesson. The lesson is I need to be in charge of me. And if I don't think that I am my own keeper of my self-esteem, and I think that I still need to find people that are going to hold on to me, well, the world will keep delivering that lesson in the form of people dropping me. And pretty soon, they won't just drop me, they'll start throwing me down. And they'll start cracking the shell more and more and more because I haven't learned the lesson. So it's actually in our favor, it's in our greater good to continue attracting people that will teach us the lessons that we need to learn for our own health and well-being. That's why when I'm not afraid of you dropping me, I will attract people that will never drop me. And if they do drop me, it's not a big deal because I'll land on my feet. So I want to go back to this idea to close out the call. If you can't trust yourself with yourself, then you can only hide yourself from yourself. You can only avoid the opportunities that will cause you to come face to face with yourself. And that's not a good decision when it comes to building a business or enjoying life in any way. So the flip side of that is when you do trust yourself with yourself, nothing can scare you. I mean, that's a very bold, exaggerated statement, but it's true. Nothing can scare you, and nothing can really truly hurt you at the core. You could be disappointed, you could be upset, you could feel pain, but it won't cut so deep in your soul because your soul's protected by yourself. We are the only ones that really have access to our own souls. And so when we're clean in that relationship, then nobody else can cut us that deep. But when we're cutting ourselves that deep constantly over and over and over again, then somebody could come by and just sneeze on us and we'll feel it in our soul. Any disruption goes straight to the soul, straight to the deepest wound, because we're constantly cutting ourselves. So trust yourself, trust your heart in your own hands, trust the process of growing, trust the process of evolving, trust the process of knowing yourself, and place more value on the process of growing than the experience of succeeding. When you have more value on growing than succeeding, success is at least 10 times easier. Probably more, because you don't have your self-esteem at risk. So hopefully I've convinced you on some level that so much of our sabotage, so much of our challenges in life are really a trust issue with ourselves. And if you place your focus on your relationship with yourself, becoming a cheerleader and not an abuser, you'd be amazed at how almost immediately a weight gets lifted, fears get removed, resistance dissolves, because there's nothing to be afraid of anymore. Because no matter what happens, you got you. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Email me, send me a message on social media, contact me somehow in any way. And I appreciate hearing and co-creating with all of you on all of this. I love you all. Take care. Have a wonderful evening. And we'll come to you with another Eagles Club call next month. Take care, everybody.